My name is Chris Sauls. I'm going to be talking about Shellfish and kind of how we play CTFs, how we run CTFs, how we kind of work as a group, and what are some of our views on how things maybe could be done better or maybe should be done. Let's see which button. Okay. So to start out, we're Shellfish. So we're from UC Santa Barbara, which is really conveniently located on the beach. It's right there, that tiny building on the right. And we really like this location. Unfortunately, there's lots of distractions. One motto that we use is Hex on the beach. Although we kind of think maybe the distractions aren't a positive impact because, you know, like PPP, they have a really bad climate and they tend to do better than us. So maybe the climate is actually hurting us, all these fun distractions that we have, whatever else. All right, we're at UC Santa Barbara. We're all part of this group called the SEC Lab. And almost all of the members of Shellfish have been in the lab, worked in it, or interned, or been a student there. And it's the lifeblood of our team. It keeps members coming in. It's how we keep finding new members. And it's really great to keep our team functioning and keep pumping people in. And as you can see, we've built up a fairly big team. That's maybe half of the people that we sometimes get at DEF CON. We get a ton of people. It can be really fun. Also an organizational nightmare. Can cause some other problems this I'll get to. All right, so I'm going to start out by talking about what a CTF is, and then I'll talk about how we organize our team, our trained members, some more stuff on that, kind of what we do when we play CTFs, what's worked, what hasn't, and then some lessons we've learned from running a CTF. Since we've been running iCTF for so long, we think we have some good ideas of what works and what doesn't for attack defense CTFs. So first of all, what's a CTF? You're all here for a CTF or your CTF. CTF, capture the flag, it actually comes from a children's game where they try to steal flags from each other's teams and bring them back to their own. And so, but in security, it's this competition where we're trying to steal a secret string or a file from someone else's computer. And they always tend to look like some funny ASCII characters, some leet speak, because hackers have to be pro, they have to be leet, so all of the flags are in leet speak. And you are always trying to exploit some vulnerable service, maybe a website, a crypto system, or reverse a binary like a keygen and figure out how to get one. There are two main formats. There are a couple other ones, but the two main ones are Jeopardy and attack defense. In Jeopardy, there's a bunch of challenges run by the organizers. These ones, Jeopardy CTFs are really easy to organize and scale, but they're not as interactive because there's no defense component, there's no real-time component. But Jeopardy challenges are great in their own way because you can have really complex problems. They can cover more difficult concepts than maybe an attack defense CTF. And during attack defense CTFs, you're often distracted by other things. You have to analyze traffic, watch your own server, watch your flags get stolen, try to stop it, you know. And so an attack defense CTF tends to look like this. Teams are stealing flags from each other, and then one team patches their service. That's shown by the lock that's actually been closed. And so now other teams cannot steal flags from that one. And during all of this, the organizers have to check that the team's services are still running. So they do this by running some functionality on that team's service and making sure it works as expected. And if a team messes up, so like that bottom team at the left, then the SLA check will fail, and they'll lose points. This happens to Shellfish a lot at CTFs. We're trying to work on that, but there's some reasons. So CTF actually started out kind of as an educational tool. The iCTF has been a big one. In fact, iCTF until maybe this year is educational only. Maybe it'll stop being educational only this year, but it started out as an educational tool to help people learn more about security, learn new techniques, and become better. But now security has become much more than just an educational tool. It's become an international competitive game. You've got CTFs with huge prizes such as $50,000. You've got people sponsoring it, paying money. There are some people that hope that one day it'll become an e-sport. That's a little tricky because it's hard to find a way to let people view and watch CTFs. As you can see, it's not very interesting to watch a bunch of hackers sitting on the computer for 24 hours, not sleeping. But maybe one day they'll find a way to make it more viewable. It's also used to further security research. As my colleague talked about, it's used in the Cyber Grand Challenge, which is a huge competition with millions of dollars in prizes intended to make security, big advancements in automated security stuff. All right, so now I'm going to talk about kind of what we do with organizing our team, and how we train members, try to get people involved. So basically the CTF team, you want to find members. Then you're going to take those members and play some CTFs. Now you're probably going to lose some CTFs. And then you want to practice some more and find more team members. And this cycle continues, and maybe one day you'll win some CTFs. So I actually started just a couple years ago on Shellfish in 2014. And before then, I had almost no experience in security. I had never looked at a binary, never opened IDA. So it was an insanely hard learning curve for me. And I think it's one thing we can really try to improve and as a team work on to train members to make sure they don't have to do that same thing. Because I went to our weekly meeting, I had never looked at anything, and they were doing a simple ROP exploit. And I tried to follow along. It was actually a high schooler leading this meeting, trying to teach people how to do ROP. And I struggled, and it was a little bit embarrassing that I was struggling to follow along a high schooler when I was a grad student, but eventually I caught up. It took a long time. It took a lot of practice, a lot of playing CTFs, a lot of doing things on my own. So how can we make this faster to learn? What can we do to help people that are starting out so they don't struggle along like I did for months until they finally start understanding? So when we talk about training, the first thing we say is you've got to practice. You've got to play as many CTFs as possible. If you're not playing CTFs, you're not looking at binaries, you're not going to learn. And when you're doing this, you should also try to read write-ups, especially for challenges you couldn't solve. Read a write-up, maybe glance over it briefly first, and then try implementing it. Read as little as you can, and then implement everything else. Another thing we've been doing is weekly practice meetings. During those meetings, we'll teach a new concept. Occasionally, we'll have a more beginner-focused meeting where we'll cover basic stuff. So we'll team up with some of the new members and help walk them through some challenges. And we always have, say, one member lead these things, and they're really good for practicing and catching up. So one of the problems we noticed is that there's some really advanced techniques that are hard to follow and hard to read. So one example is some malloc exploitation in malloc decimal alpha carum. If you ever looked at that paper, it's really hard to follow, really hard to read. So what we decided is it's easy to read C code, or small C source code for these things. So we've been writing some C code for some difficult techniques, such as these heap ones. And we put this online on GitHub as how to heap. And we found that this really helps organize and lay out the steps you need for some of these difficult exploits. And they're really great for CTFs because you can say, oh, I have an off by one. What can I do with it? Okay, this example shows how to exploit an off by one. So you just follow the example and implement the steps. And it becomes kind of straightforward. Now, one of the things we've also had trouble with is including less experienced members. Because during these meetings, you don't really want to be talking about a basic buffer overflow. You've done it a million times yourself. But the new people haven't. So it's kind of this dichotomy. Who do you include? The more experienced people who still need to get better, though, or the less experienced people that are trying to catch up and learn? So a couple suggestions we have is always start them out on like Pico CTF. I think that's a great one for beginners. It's written by the people from CMU, and it will walk them through some of the early challenges, the early types of basic concepts. And always be willing to help the new members. Get them to ask questions as they get stuck, because they'll get stuck for sure. Another one I like is pwnable.kr. That's what I used when I was kind of starting out after a couple months of practice. I went through most of those, and that really helped me to kind of understand the more difficult concepts. So some of the challenges for new members is motivation. This thing takes a lot of time. Do they want to put that much time in? It's up to them. You have to let them know. We try to make it seem really fun, show them all the cool things we get to go do. Like we get to go to other countries like Russia and get to play in CTF there. That's pretty awesome. And if you practice, you can do that too. There's a steep learning curve. Like I said, it takes a long time to catch up. And so you have to help them through that. Another challenge is for people who work remotely. If you're in a lab, it's kind of easy to ask questions, it's easy to get help, and easy to collaborate. But if you're working remotely, you are on chat with people, but it's not too easy. You can ask questions, but you won't maybe get immediate feedback. You won't be able to see what other people do live. So, at least with the ones that are local, the people who are not remote, you may want to include them and make sure that you're working with them. Let them work on the easier challenges, and if they get stuck, work on the challenge with them. That way they can see what the steps are to solve it, or see what types of things you do. And that can really help people learn. If you're watching a more experienced person, then you start to see, oh, this is the right way to make a struct in IDA. Oh, okay, this makes it much easier to read. Or, oh, that's a much faster way to figure out where the crash is, or how to debug my broken exploit. So that's collaboration. Collaboration is hugely important for catching people up and for doing well in CTFs. And it's great for the person writing the exploit because of this idea of rubber duck debugging. As you're talking about what you're trying to do, you realize, oh, that was stupid. Maybe I should be doing it this way. And you can debug your own challenge, your own solution by just talking about it, just trying to explain to someone else. And when you're collaborating with other people, you get to learn from others. You get to see how they think about the problem, see some of the techniques they use, because your techniques might be what you're used to, but they might not be the best ones. So when you collaborate, you get to see other points of view and see other ways to do things. You get to see, and it's great for new members to see how to use complex tools such as GDB, IDA, etc. Now, one other thing with collaboration is new players can help older players improve. Like, for example, you can see an older player that uses just regular GDB, and you go, no, this is bad. It takes you forever to figure out what's going on. Use something more advanced like PETA, or Kira is a good one. And so with all these tools, one problem we've had is there's a lot of things to install. It takes time to find them. It's annoying. So one thing we did, or when a guy from our team did, is make a curated list of all these. So we went through, grabbed the best tools, put them online, made installers for all of these. So some of these have annoying steps to install, and he simplified it, made an install script, put them all online at github.com/zarda/CTF tools. Check it out if you want some tools for your CTFs. All right, so when you're playing CTFs, we've played lots of CTFs. We have some experience with how to lose them, what kind of helped, what kind of didn't. And so one thing is, what other people tend to do, and what the right way probably is you want to practice during the CTF you hack and after you party. Pretty straightforward, have fun doing it. Now, what we've kind of done in the past and hasn't worked too well is before we'll write tools, we'll say this fancy tool will really help us during DEF CON. We'll be able to finally win. During DEF CON, we'll debug our tools and everything will break. And then after DEF CON, we'll plan new tools that will surely break later. Now, tools are great. Just be careful with how much work you put into them. And if they're super complex and likely to break, maybe they're not something that's going to be too helpful. So we have made some kind of good tools, especially Anger. Was talked about a lot in Nick's presentation previously. A couple other ones, Shell Noob for making some shell code, Xdrop for finding drop gadgets, Preeny for doing LD preload tricks, and how to heap, as I mentioned earlier. Now, Jeopardy CTFs are pretty straightforward. They don't require too much strategy. Each person can kind of look at what's being done and jump on a challenge. It's really easy if you're using Slack or IRC or something, just make a channel for each challenge, and then people can easily just jump to it, take a look and say, okay, this is what people have tried, this is where everyone is, maybe I should work on this. But for attack defense CTFs, if you let people self-organize, sometimes it becomes a mess, and you get 0% SLA. At least that's what's happened to us in the past, because we have a fairly large team, and organizing is difficult. So one thing we try to do is assign roles. Say, okay, you're going to be on attack, or you're going to be on defense. I think one really good thing is to have challenge leaders. So one person will know the challenge, and every time you want to patch it, your patch has to go through the challenge leader. And that way you can kind of keep people from breaking your service and pushing patches that don't work or will actually just break other functionality. And if you can have dedicated people looking at something like PCAPs or a specific challenge, I think it helps. It focuses people, keeps them working on something, and you can also assign people tasks that fit their skill level. So people who may be less experienced might be better off looking for PCAPs or working on defense or something. All right, and so we've been running the iCTF for a long time, and we've learned some things from it, and we have some ideas of kind of what I think we should be doing to make better CTFs, to make better attack defense CTFs, and makes the CTF community keep growing. So about the iCTF, it's one of the longest running CTFs. It's been running since 2003, actually. So that's 13, it'll be 13 years now, I think, or at least this year will be 13. And it's an attack defense CTF, and it was aimed toward education. It was aimed toward helping people learn to get better, helping people learn about security. And now one thing about CTF is we always try new things in there. Some of them haven't been too popular. Like in the most recent year, we tried asking people to write their own challenges, and that got a much smaller showing than in the previous years. But we always try new things, and I think that's important because it helps keep CTF improving. You help try to improve not just the challenge design, but the design of the CTF itself. Because it's kind of been the same thing for the last couple years. There's not been any changes in how CTFs are run. All right, so we've done a lot of different things, as I mentioned, the last couple of years. Last year, we tried having people write their own challenges, crowdsourced evil. The year before that, we tried doing a ton of challenges, like 42 challenges in a single 8-hour CTF. And we've done other things, like including combining Jeopardy and attack defense, having specific themes. And one thing that's important is there aren't that many attack defense CTFs. UCSB iCTF is one of them, RUSE CTF. There's been a couple smaller ones, but we really are lacking good online attack defense CTFs. And I think these ones are better for learning security because you get a more interactive game. You get to look at both the attack component and the defense component, and both are important in security. So challenge-based CTF are very easy to organize, very easy to run. You just have to make challenges, put them online, set up a scoreboard. It's kind of straightforward. Attack defense CTFs, on the other hand, can be really hard to make. It's very easy for your infrastructure to get overwhelmed by all the people submitting things, trying to attack other people. You have to be always checking whose services are up, whose services are down, and this has to happen real time. And anytime it goes down, if there's a bug, that can really cause problems in scoring, and players will get unhappy. So, some suggestions for running a CTF. It takes a lot of time to prepare. Don't just expect to be able to put a week in and to have a good CTF. The other thing is you want to play lots of CTFs before you try running one. If you don't know what people usually do or what's been done before, you're likely to mess up when trying to run it. For example, you don't want to have a challenge that's already been done before. You don't want to do challenge that's too easy, too hard. So if you've played a lot, then you can kind of get a feel for this. So what makes a good challenge? I think good challenges are the most important part of a good CTF. Even if everything else is running well, if the challenges are bad, the CTF will be bad. All right, so the first thing is a challenge needs to be interesting. It needs to be different. If it's the same type of exploitation you've done 100 times, you don't want to do it. It'll be boring. If it's kind of just tedious, even if it's hard, it's not going to be too fun. It needs to be interesting. It should also take skill. You don't want challenges that anyone could just solve with some time. You want challenges that will take actual thought, will take practice, and require people to actually be good. A difficult to exploit bug is more fun than a difficult to find bug. I guess this one's pretty subjective, but people really enjoy challenges where it's not too hard to see what the problem is, what the bug is, but it's hard to actually go from the bug to exploitation, go from the bug to actually stealing the flag. So it's important to test your challenges. It's really easy to misestimate how difficult it is. Oftentimes I see challenges where I'm sure the organizer never wrote an exploit themselves because they maybe include a vulnerability like, oh, let's just put a format string vulnerability in here, it'll be easy to solve. But they didn't try, and because of other things going on, it ends up being really hard. So make sure to write a solution yourself, and make sure to have someone else try to solve it. It's really important to get a feel for it and make sure it works as you intend. When you're writing challenges, avoid guessing. This is especially true for web. You don't want people to have to guess some random flag path or hidden file name or hidden parameter. That's not really fun. Competitors don't like running brute force tools. It's not interesting. Some of the best web challenges actually provide source code. If you can provide source code for a challenge and have it still be interesting and hard, that's a good sign. For pwnables, you don't want people to have to work on guessing libraries. That's annoying. It takes time. If you're lucky, their library will match. So you give them the libraries. Make it so that the annoying part isn't part of the challenge. Make sure that they don't have to do the annoying stuff, just the fun stuff. For attack defense, there's a lot of extra considerations in writing challenges and running them. For one, teams can patch. This makes a big difference in what the challenges should look like. And teams often will have patches you didn't intend. And it's kind of hard to predict how teams will try to defend a particular exploit. And this can make a challenge really easy or really hard. Teams can also analyze the traffic. If it's really easy to see what an exploit is over in your traffic, then the challenge might not be too fun if it's too easy to just see it and copy it. And then another issue is how much control should the teams have? Should you give them root? Should you just give them permissions to change the binaries? Should you maybe just give them permissions to filter traffic? These are all different things that have been tried in CTFs. Some of them work better, some of them haven't. So when you're designing a service, as opposed to a challenge, I feel like a service needs to have more depth than a challenge. So when you're doing attack defense-based CTF, you don't want to look at a service, find one vulnerability, exploit it, and move on. You want to look at a service, find a vulnerability, exploit it, patch it, then find another vulnerability, exploit it, patch it. And you want to keep finding these and trying to patch them. In fact, one of my favorite challenges that I've seen in a CTF was a web one at HitCon Finals, which had like 12 or 15 vulnerabilities. That's an insane number. But it was really fun, it was really fast-paced, and there was always stuff going on in that challenge. And that made it interesting. I think that services should also be kind of difficult to defend. If it's really easy to just knock out a function or replace one parameter, yeah, that will happen a lot, but it's not that fun for people, and I feel like defense should actually be one of the challenges. Right now, defense tends to be just a side thought after you find the exploit and after you do the exploit. You figure out, you just change one number in the source code and then, or in the hex editor, and then it's patched. Another thing about services, it should be kind of difficult to copy exploits. If you can just take an exploit you've seen over wire and paste that into a netcat and then get the flag out, that's not too fun. That's kind of boring, and it doesn't make the teams work for exploits. So to make things difficult to copy, you have to do something special. The challenge, you have to make sure that some randomness is involved, like often this can just be the ASLR from library loading, or you might have the teams, allow the teams to do some encryption of traffic, or maybe randomize the challenges so that there's some state that they actually need to process and interpret, so they actually have to understand the bugs to be able to copy exploits. Another thing about patching is when you want people to actually have to patch the exploits, not just apply a giant patch. So when patching, you want people to be finding the exploits, finding where to patch it, and applying those, as opposed to just putting one big patch over the whole binary and being indestructible, unable to be exploited. So in that area of thought, there's lots of boring patches that work pretty well, and these kind of limit how fun attack defense CTFs are. One thing I've seen is like people limit the number of file descriptors that can be opened. And so that way, you try to write an exploit that would open the flag and it fails. You don't have time to debug it, and so you move on, and this team is protected just because they set the number of file descriptors to a max of 3 or something. That's not interesting, and so maybe CTF writers should think about these when writing their challenges. Another one is LD preload tricks. If you LD preload and say maybe LD preload so you can watch open, and watch the open never opens the flag. That's boring. People can get around it if they know what you're doing, but it takes time. And these tricks are not interesting for writers. Another one is knopping out free. If you try to do a heap-based exploit in an attack defense, people will just replace free with a no-op and then be perfectly safe. So some tricks to stop this: in CGC, they limit the amount of memory. In White Hat, they only allow people to filter traffic, not patch the binaries themselves. I don't know that either of these are good solutions, and it'll probably require some more work before someone comes with a good solution to limiting some of these tricks. Now, iCTF, we have a way of limiting a few of these tricks. In iCTF, the binary will read the flag as part of its normal interaction. That's because we use the flag as a secret file, but have a password that's needed to read the flag. And this way, as part of the benign checks, we'll give the password, and we should expect to be able to get the flag out. Or we'll give this other secret parameter, and we should be able to receive a flag. An exploit should exist to bypass this protection. And this actually prevents some of the boring defenses, because you can't just watch for your flag getting read out and stop it. You can't limit the number of file descriptors. And we notice that some CTFs like DEF CON don't ever do this, and make it really easy for competitors to implement the boring defenses. So maybe teams should consider doing it more of this style with the challenges, making it so the challenges actually are meant to read the flag file occasionally. Another thing about the iCTF is infrastructure. We know is a big part of it, and takes a long time to set it up, and it's a lot of work. Because if you have a lot of teams and the teams are all attacking each other, it becomes this n-squared complexity. You get a ton of data flowing through, and your servers have to be really prepared, really fast, running well. Otherwise, you will notice your services go down, the database goes down. You have a situation where people can't even submit flags, and that will destroy your CTF. So one thing we've done is we've open sourced the iCTF framework, and we're actually working on putting a newer, better version up soon. And we hope by doing this that people can learn from our lessons and be able to use what we've done instead of trying to reinvent it and trying to do it themselves. So in doing the iCTF framework, we actually formalized the structure of challenges. We had them have a get flag script, a set flag script. We use these pieces to make a formalized definition of a challenge that makes it really easy to know what you need to write and to be able to test that challenges work correctly. So the new version will be out soon. I don't know, maybe a month or so. When it is, you should check it out and maybe consider using it for an attack defense CTF. Now, in conclusion, CTFs are really interesting. They're a fun way to learn security. They're great for education, and people love them. But there's still a lot of room to improve. There's issues like the dumb patches I was talking about that people still need to figure out. There's how can we make challenges more interesting? Maybe there's ways to even make the CTFs more interesting. There's different styles that people have tried, such as King of the Hill and SecCon, or this other CTF has had people write their own challenges. Maybe there's other ways that we can make CTFs better. And I hope that we can see them get better and that maybe they can continue to grow in popularity. Maybe even one day they can become an esport or something. I don't know. That's a little bit far-fetched. All right. Any questions?
Oh, hi again. Do you have some kind of a problem that students or PhD students which exit the university, you just lose them? So they kind of go to work to some other city, to some other place. So how do you renew members? So what's the process? Do you at least have this problem?
We have that same problem. We try to keep them involved. We try to say, hey, this challenge is perfect, exactly what you enjoy working on. But when people move out, they often get families, full-time jobs. It's hard to keep them interested, and it's hard keeping them motivated. I don't have a solution for that. We haven't actually managed to get people to keep playing after they've moved out very well. There's a couple of people that stay nearby that we get to pull in occasionally for like DEF CON. For the big ones, we kind of hype it up and say, hey, everyone come play. And we can get some of those people to come back for those. But other than that, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to keep people interested.